In today's episode of Mr. Birchum, we learn that charity is bad and that sexual misconduct is good. Birchum. 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 So we're 5 episodes into Mr. Birchum. How are we feeling? Well, I'm just feeling good that after 125 minutes, the writers have finally decided to make ideas based on themes, concepts. They finally Googled how to write an episode of television. And today we're tackling a fun one. The writers barely disguise contempt for the concept of charity. Our episode begins with Wendy, portrayed as a domineering wino.
Smile until our freaking faces break!
Pass Mommy the wine, please. The bottle.
Forcing her family to volunteer for Habitat for Humanity. Remember, kids, anytime a mother expresses desire to spend time with her kids, first, she should be mocked, and then she should be belittled for being hysterical. The only true purpose of a mother is to buy quirky coasters, t-shirts, and assorted knickknacks that exist to commodify alcohol addiction. The rest of the family is completely annoyed at the notion of giving back to their community in any way, including Mr. Birchum, which actually doesn't make any sense if you take 2 seconds to think about it. They are volunteering for Habitat for Humanity, you know, the charity that builds things, that builds houses. And Mr. Birchum throughout the entire series is complaining like, I hate my work, I hate the kids, I hate my life, I just want to build things. Newsflash, idiot, that's what you do at a Habitat for Humanity site. Maybe he just isn't into the idea because he knows eventually that house has to go to a poor TM. And speaking of a poor TM, if you're watching my videos and you like my content, or if you're brand new, please subscribe. It's free, and only 5% of you who watch these videos are subscribed. It's an easy way to show and help support the channel. I make 1 to 2 new videos every week. Please subscribe. Thank you so much. We're gonna do the heart consistently. Maybe, I don't know. But one of Birchum's main reasons why he doesn't want to go is he wants to just sit on his couch, watch football, and drink beer. And it should be noted at this point, if it wasn't immediately obvious by episode 2 where he gets blackout drunk, Mr. Birchum is an alcoholic, big time.
I got your test results. You're positive. You got
alcoholism.
Yes.
Alcoholism.
Big time.
There's even a line here about how he smuggles beers into his trucks for family events.
Why are you smiling? Did you hide beer in the truck again?
And just for those of you out there, there are a couple signs of alcoholism. The first is if you find yourself drinking 10 shots on a Friday night, and then day drinking the next Saturday, which, you know, unless you're in college, then it doesn't count. So for those of you out there watching that applies to, congratulations! Enjoy your 4-year get-out-of-jail-free card until society tells you that you have a problem. But Mr. Birchum's desire for relaxation and consequently alcohol is definitely an obstacle in this episode because, you know, it's always very endearing and charming when the supposed hero of your show is a doddering drunk that impacts the plot. I mean, imagine how much worse Star Wars would be if Luke Skywalker was complaining the entire time he wanted to go back to Tatooine to drink beer. Imagine they're all just stuck in the trash compactor and he's just yelling, "God damn it, Han. I want to be back in the Mos Eisley Cantina drinking Coors Light and eating jalapeno poppers. This sucks." But despite his opposition, Mr. Birchum and his family go to the Habitat for Humanity site regardless. It's always funny in these so-called conservative TV shows that the men always end up acquiescing to their wives anyway. Naturally, because this show is written by people who both detest the concept of a social safety net, but also paradoxically hate the idea of charity, the worksite is a complete mess. The worksite is full of incompetent people without direction and influencers, and I really have to complain about something because this genuinely pissed me off. I've actually volunteered for Habitat for Humanity, and as this show depicts it as technically homes for humanity, as it is depicted, it is completely inaccurate and frankly a little bit insulting. Habitat for Humanity has full-time employees with construction expertise, imagine that, so they can actually direct volunteers who don't know anything about construction, like me, to do things that are actually helpful. In the show, though, they don't have that. Instead, the foreman of the worksite is Mr. Carponzi, even though he is already employed full-time with the school, and he also works for that tech store, and also I'm realizing I know far too much lore about Mr. Birchum. God, please save my soul. And instead of trying to help people or direct volunteers, Mr. Carponzi is trying to teach people about pronouns.
Hey kids, who wants to learn about preferred pronouns?
Every episode I watch of this show breaks me. Just a little bit, but noticeably every single time. If I was running a right-wing parody show, I would literally just lift jokes straight up from the show. But the difference is I would be saying them as a parody, and this show is saying them because they honestly believe them. But shockingly, during my time with Habitat for Humanity, I was not lectured on pronouns. Instead, I was given instruction to complete the basic but entirely necessary tasks that somebody with very little construction expertise could actually do. You know, that's kind of how that whole charity works. So, because Habitat's such an awesome charity and they were defamed needlessly in this horrible piece of conservative media, and I feel bad that I spend $15 on Daily Wire Plus, I'm going to take $15 and also give it to Habitat for Humanity. And there's a link in the description if you want to donate money or get involved, and or both. But they're really a great charity. Did not deserve to be catching a stray from Mr. Birchum, of all places. Another thing I should note here is that the Mr. Birchum gay theories they've continued to grow in this episode, which I'm very excited about. Or he just could be mentally ill. Although I'm realizing that's not necessarily exclusive, they certainly are in my case. My mental illness and my homosexuality come together in a fun Jennifer Lopez Ben Affleck style marriage. Mr. Birchum has multiple visions of Burly Man, the mascot of a frozen food brand that he likes a lot, played again by Patrick Warburton, who's really letting his career go but he's also accompanied by their fun bear sidekick, who honestly, every single scene, they're serving cunt.
Two words that should never go together. Charity and work, like women and opinions.
The pair reminds Mr. Birchum that he is the only person who could possibly save this work site and get them back on track to build the house that they're supposed to build. And look, the potential metaphor of Birchum seeing visions of a very hairy man that he idolized ever since he was a child alongside a giant bear is really not lost on me. It's also not lost on me that he daydreams about dancing with Mr. Carponzi. All this is to say is that I will be making a Mr. Birchum Pride Month video, so you're definitely going to want to subscribe for that. Certainly stay tuned. That's going to be a really fun video. But after Mr. Birchum sees his gay visions, he decides to actually be a real foreman and directs the volunteers on how to actually get the job done. And this is perhaps the only time I will give Mr. Birchum a modicum of credit. The people all around him are annoying and they are awful. Upon being given any sort of actual instructions / commands / direction, everybody immediately decides to leave the work site. And look, I can understand the so-called influencers leaving when they actually have to do real work.
Wait, what? We're actually volunteering? I thought we were just taking selfies.
But literally everybody else also leaves. Like, you signed up to be on Habitat for Humanity. You need to nail things down and be given actual instructions so you can build the house. But when seemingly all is lost, Mr. Birchum's family comes to his rescue, and they have to work extra hard so that the house can pass a frame inspection by the end of the episode, which is something that they kind of just shoehorn in at the end. I guess they forgot to add stakes, and they forgot to introduce that plot point earlier.
While Danny kind of forgot about the Iron Fleet and Euron's forces, they certainly haven't forgotten about her.
At the start of the video, I mentioned sexual misconduct, and while it might not be quite as severe as that, it's certainly behavior that is probably overstepping, made me feel uncomfortable, and is almost certainly a violation of the teacher code of conduct. So the B-plot of this episode revolves around Brad, who's a character who I've talked about a little bit as kind of the teacher's pet. I don't actually think I've said him by name. He's been in a lot of the episodes, but he's never been super relevant. But in this episode, he needs to find a date to the Sadie Hawkins dance. And if you've never heard of it, congratulations, bestie, because I had to look that up. Apparently it's a name for a dance where the girls have to ask the guys, so, you know, because it's a question about gender, we have to hear Mr. Carponzi's crazy riffs on it.
We want to be very clear that we are not stating that any of you who identify as girls are ugly.
The name of a Sadie Hawkins dance represents the Sunday comic strip Lil Abner, which ran from 1934 to 1977. So yet another very relevant and topical pop culture reference. I had never even heard of Lil Abner, which is saying something because I'm one of the biggest Jeopardy girlies that I know. So if I've not heard of something, even in passing, like, I'm usually not gonna blame myself. Lil Abner is giving me, like, big 2,000 point question that nobody gets, and that just becomes a triple stumper. And then Ken is like, Lil Abner, you guys must be a little too young for that one. And just to give you an idea of what the comic strip was like, I'm going to read the character description of the namesake Sadie Hawkins. Sadie Hawkins is considered the homeliest girl in Dogpatch. Her father, Hexzebia Hawkins, a prominent Dogpatch resident, does not want Sadie to live at home for the rest of his life, and establishes the first annual Sadie Hawkins Day, a foot race in which all the unmarried women pursue the town's bachelors and get married if they catch them. I think the show has officially moved on from appealing to a Gen X audience, if the cultural references we're having are referencing sexist newspaper cartoons that were popular in the 1950s. Like, we've moved beyond Gen X. We've gone backwards to Gen W. But Brad, again, whose kind of only personality is that he loves Mr. Birchum and that he's a teacher's pet and that he, is really good at woodworking, he's upset that no girl has asked him out to the dance. So Birchum asks Gage to help him out with this, and I don't really know how to put this, but they're both very touchy throughout this entire process as they're depicted in the animation. And it just didn't really sit right with me, especially when they're already doing something that is kind of weird, that is training this kid so he can be dateable.
Oh no, don't give up. This is not over yet, Brad. Are you rich?
No.
Shoe size?
6.5?
Ooh, now it's over.
Maybe that's just me, but that's personally not something I would say to a middle school student, especially one who, for one of his projects, made his teacher's face on a giant table. And also, this has made me think about some of my own experiences. I was never told to be gay by my schools, which I know is what the show Mr. Birchum thinks that's what they're trying to tell me.
Girls don't like me.
First, stop presuming they're girls. Maybe those students assigned female at birth haven't yet determined their affectional orientation.
But my earth science teacher literally did try to set me up with one of the girls in my class, which did not really go over well for that girl in my class. Our teacher had left us a bunch of notes in Microsoft OneNote, and he was like, have you guys checked the OneNote? And then when we checked the OneNote, her face immediately went so red, and she was like, we need to talk to him, although she had a British accent, so she was like, we need to talk to him. So we both go over to talk to him, and while she's yelling at him in a British accent, I'm just standing there, slowly realizing that I may, in fact, be a homosexual. But before we get into the end of the episode, I just want to say something about the overall animation quality of the entire series up to this point. It's been bad, and this episode by far was the worst. And I know I mentioned I was impressed in episode 4 by the moving hammers and talking tools and what I perceived to be a relatively creative set piece. I then found out, thanks to the commenters, that it was completely stolen from Pink Floyd. So, oops. This show loves unfunny pop cultural references. There's even a Britney reference in this episode, which, they're not even referencing modern, fun, knife-wielding Britney. They're referencing, oh, she shaved her head and went crazy, which is just, very lame at this point. Make fun of cool knives, Britney. There's also another timely reference to the movie of Roadhouse. How does he get a black eye if he didn't even fall on his eye? You know what? Let's move past it. Let's move past it. You guys all leave me such great comments, except for those of you who call me a faggot. But the one that I really liked about this was one by someone called Sketch Frame Studio, who gives an entire detailed takedown and breakdown about everything wrong with the animation. And one of the things they identified as a potential cause for why the animation was so horrible is just a severe lack of time to polish the final product. And I then went and found another comment from somebody who actually animated the show, which basically confirmed that. They revealed that this entire Made in America type show is actually animated entirely by a bunch of people from Valencia, Spain. They put some references to Valencia in the episodes, including in Principal Bortles' office. And although they were using something called 2D cutout rigs, which is the same animation style as Rick and Morty, they were not given enough time to actually polish those products, unlike Rick and Morty, and they were also directed specifically to make the animation look kind of stiff and not cartoony, which is a bold creative direction to take a cartoon. That's like being told to make a steak that doesn't taste like meat. It's a direction that doesn't even make sense, and it's just going to upset whoever is having to consume your final product. Although the main issue that they said was a severe lack of time and resources, I can't imagine they were compensated very well for this, they also had to deal with the fact that most of the animators who worked on this show were LGBTQ+, having to work on a show that really doesn't like the fact that we exist. They're not a fan of it. So, consequently, that doesn't manifest in a lot of passion in the animation style. But the most visible manifestation of this incredible time crunch is in this episode, and in a couple episodes before, which I talked about, is that they were having to animate multiple characters in something called 3s and 4s. Animation is typically shot in 24 frames per second, meaning that in one single second, there are 24 different pictures that are moving a tiny bit so that it looks smooth when it's put together. And so when you're animating in 3s and 4s, instead of 24 pictures per second, you are going to have 8 or 6, which ultimately looks like crap, and it looks like this. Although I guess on a certain level, I actually should be kind of grateful, because when they're animating like that, it means that I actually am technically seeing less Mr. Birchum. Huh? I'm sorry, I'm coping. Anyways, Mr. Birchum partners with Switchblade, played by Danny Trejo, to accomplish the project. And Danny Trejo, I am sorry that you're in this project. I really hope that you got paid something. You clearly didn't get paid a lot, because this character is basically mute for the entire first half of the episode. And that either means that Danny Trejo was being paid by the character, which, like, in that case, go off, King. Or, like, they literally only got him in for, like, 2 hours. He was like, I have an Applebee's reservation at 12. Let's just keep this rolling, guys. Anyways, after Mr. Birchum and his family and a couple other people finish the build and pass the inspection, everybody who abandoned them comes back to celebrate, which, like, no! Fuck off! Get the fuck out! You do not deserve a drop of Mr. Birchum's glory, you succubuses. Is that the correct plural? Succubi? Succubussies? See any? Succubussies, oh no. And to resolve Brad's plotline, he also finds a girl at the Habitat for Humanity worksite and woos her with his immaculate riz. And by immaculate riz, I mean he just talks to her about crafts and woodworking, and that they're meant for each other, I guess. Then there's also one line earlier in the episode that just doesn't make any sense to me, said by Mr. Birchum.
Sometimes I'm scared she's becoming the L word.
A lesbian?
A liberal!
And by the way, I think Mr. Birchum should probably be at least a little bit afraid of his wife actually being a lesbian and leaving him, given that it's already happened once.
I'm a lesbian now.
Like, that's the type of trauma you gotta go to therapy to unpack. And something tells me that Mr. Birchum has, not been to therapy. But also, like, Wendy is at best politically apathetic and at worst, a liberal. She has talked about Obama in most of these episodes and has gone to his campaign rallies. Now, it has been said that maybe the only reason she supported Obama was because she thought he was attractive, but in which case, okay, let's look at the 2020 election. Okay, maybe they both look like wrinkled bags of scrotum, but let's turn back the clock, look at them when they were younger. I feel like the choice is clear, and that Wendy would be riding with Biden. So that brings us to the end, my friends, and I think next week may very well be the season finale of Mr. Birchum. So this could be the penultimate Birchum episode. Also could be back for season 2. I think that it's probably a coin flip as to whether or not this show gets renewed, because I can't imagine it was that expensive to make, and it has gotten clearly a significant amount of attention online. Either way, though, you should subscribe, because I have been here before Birchum, and I will be here after. But that's going to do it for me, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like, please comment. Helps get my video out to more people. And I want to hear your thoughts. I do read every comment. This episode, was it a step forward? Was it a step back? Is it offensive to you? It kind of annoyed me a lot. But as always, my name is Patrick, but my friends call me Pat, and I'll see you for the next one.